The first sound is not a voice. It is a soft scraping, fine grit moving across stone. A quiet shush. As your fingers guide a small cylinder against a flat slab. Near your left hand, a lamp gives one steady flame. Warm light, deep shadow. And on the work surface, dust gathers in a thin crescent, stone ground down into powder too fine to count. You turn the little cylinder once more, slowly. As if the day begins by polishing time itself. You don't need to stay alert tonight. This is a working day told gently, a craft day made of stone, clay, and repetition. If you're tired, you can let your shoulders fall. You can let your breathing slow. Nothing here will rush you. The only urgency is the quiet kind, the kind that comes from hands that must stay steady. It is early in Uruk. The air still holds a little coolness before the sun builds its weight. Somewhere nearby, a courtyard or workroom is already awake, not with shouting but with small sounds. A jar set down, a reed basket brushed aside, a door opened and closed with care. Your workshop is not grand. It is practical. A place where you can sit close to your tools and keep them clean. Because your work is not just decoration. Your work is identity. A cylinder seal is used to leave a continuous impression when rolled on wet clay, an identifying mark used on ceilings for jars/doors/baskets and on documents/tablets to indicate authority. In this world, a person can own a seal the way a person owns a name. And when you carve a seal, you are carving something meant to travel. From storerooms to doorways, from jar lids to clay tablets, from one careful hand to another. Uruk is not just large. It is something new in human history. A place where enough people gather that strangers are routine. Where specialization becomes necessary. Where identity itself requires technology. You live in this newness without calling it new. To you, Uruk is simply the world. But the world before Uruk was different. Smaller. Villages of a few hundred people where everyone knew everyone. Where most people grew food, made their own tools, built their own shelters. That world is ending. Or perhaps transforming. And you are part of the transformation. Current estimates suggest Uruk holds perhaps 40,000 people. Maybe more. No one counts. No one needs to count. But the density is obvious. The streets are never empty. The temples are never quiet. The markets are never without activity. 40,000 people create 40,000 daily needs. Food, water, shelter, tools, clothing, security, coordination. This is why seals exist. Why your craft exists. Why identity must become portable and verifiable. Because in a village of 300, faces are known. Voices are familiar. Trust is personal. When someone says I closed that door, people know whether to believe them. But in a city of 40,000, most people are strangers. Most transactions involve people who have never met. Most promises must be verified through something other than reputation alone. So marks become necessary. Signatures, proofs, physical evidence that can be checked. Your cylinder seals are part of this new world's infrastructure. Not its grandest part, not its most visible part, but essential nevertheless. The city itself sprawls across perhaps 250 hectares, perhaps more. The exact boundary is unclear because Uruk does not have walls in the way later cities will. The city simply exists, dense at the center, gradually less dense toward edges, eventually fading into fields and irrigation channels. At the heart sits the temple district. Not one temple, several. Large mud brick structures on raised platforms. Buildings that required thousands of worker days to construct. Buildings that represent collective effort on a scale villages never attempted. These temples are not just religious. They are also administrative centers, economic centers, places where goods are collected, distributed, recorded, places where your seals will be used most often. Because temple households control much of the city's surplus. Grain collected from fields, wool from flocks, fish from nets, oil pressed from plants. All of this flows through temple administration. All of this must be tracked, secured, verified. and verification requires marks, seals, identity impressed into clay. The streets of Uruk are not planned with geometric precision the way some later cities will be. They emerge organically. Narrow paths between mud brick walls. Wider routes connecting major areas. Spaces that become gathering points because they are convenient, not because someone designed them. You navigate these streets daily. From your workshop to the temple district. From the temple district to the merchants area. From merchants back home. The routes become automatic. Your feet know the way even when your mind wanders. Along these routes, you see the city's diversity. Potters, weavers, metal workers, basket makers, reed workers, stone workers, people who press oil, people who brew beer, people who slaughter animals, people who tan hides, people who grind grain. Each specialist produces more than their household needs. Each specialist trades surplus for other specialists' products. And this web of exchange requires trust mechanisms. Seals again. Marks that say this container was filled by me, or this basket was closed under my authority, or this tablet records an agreement I authorize. The writing system developing alongside cylinder seals is still young. Very young. Not the cuneiform that will become standard in later centuries, but proto-cuneiform. Pictographic signs pressed into clay. Signs that represent objects, quantities, sometimes names. This writing serves administrative functions primarily. Counting, recording, tracking. Not literature, not letters, not laws. Just the practical work of managing surplus in a large population. You cannot read fluently. Few people can. But you recognize some signs. The ones relevant to your work. Symbols for stone, for seal, for completion, for delivery. And you understand the fundamental principle. Marks on clay create memory external to human minds. Memory that can be checked, verified, disputed if necessary. Your seals participate in this same principle. They create marks that outlast the moment of creation, that can be examined later, that can prove or disprove claims about what happened. The population density creates other challenges beyond economics. Sanitation, water supply, fire risk, conflict between neighbors, criminal activity. Uruk addresses these through emerging social structures. Not formal government in the way later city-states will have, but something. Temple administrators who exercise authority. Respected elders who mediate disputes. Specialists in various functions who coordinate informally. You exist within this network without thinking about it much. When you need stone, you know which suppliers to approach. When you complete a seal, you know which officials might commission the next one. When a dispute arises, you know whose judgment will be respected. This knowledge is not written. It is social, accumulated through years of living in the city, passed through observation and participation. The agricultural foundation remains visible even in the city center. Most households still grow some food, maintain some animals, participate in harvest work during critical periods. Urban life has not fully separated from rural life. They interpenetrate. But specialization is increasing. Each generation, slightly more people spend most time on non-food production. Each generation, surplus becomes slightly more centralized. Each generation, coordination becomes slightly more necessary. And each generation, marks become slightly more important. Your father was not a seal engraver. Your father was a farmer who also knew some stone work. He taught you stone work, but you specialized further. Found a master engraver. Apprenticed. Became a burgul, the Sumerian word for seal cutter. This specialization was possible because Uruk had grown large enough to support it. Because enough people needed seals that someone could make a living providing them. Because the administrative complexity created demand. In a smaller settlement, you would still be a farmer who knew some stone work. Like your father. Like most people. But Uruk allows deeper specialization. And deeper specialization creates better tools. Better seals. Better verification systems. which enables the city to grow larger, which enables even more specialization. This cycle is self-reinforcing, and Uruk is at the early stage of it, a moment when cities are new, when the possibilities are still being discovered, when every generation experiences changes their grandparents never imagined. You do not think of yourself as living through a revolution. Revolution is a concept that will be invented later. You simply do your work, make seals, provide identity technology to people who need it. But you are part of something unprecedented, the invention of urban life, the transformation of human organization from personal to institutional, from face-to-face to system-mediated. And cylinder seals are one of the technologies making this transformation possible. Not the only technology, not even the most important, but essential, because without verification, trust fails. Without trust, exchange fails. Without exchange, specialization fails. Without specialization, density fails. Without density, cities fail. So when you drill a bore through stone, you are not just making a hole. You are creating a component of urban infrastructure. A small component, but necessary. When you carve a design in reverse, you are not just decorating. You are creating an identity marker that enables transactions between strangers, between people who will never know each other's faces, who need something more durable than memory, more portable than presence. The city sounds surround you constantly. Human voices, animal sounds, tools striking, wheels turning, water flowing through irrigation channels, wind moving through reed structures. In a village, silence was common, especially at night. But in Uruk, silence is rare. Even at night, the city murmurs. People moving, people working, people living in density. This constant presence of others becomes normal. You stop noticing it. But when you leave the city, which is rare, the silence of open country feels strange, almost threatening. Too much space, too few people, too much vulnerability. The city offers safety through numbers. If you call for help, someone will hear. If someone threatens you, witnesses exist. This collective security is another benefit of density. Another reason why urban life, once started, attracts more people. The food supply required to sustain 40,000 people is substantial. Grain arrives daily from surrounding fields, fish from the river, meat from herds, vegetables from gardens, beer from brewers, bread from bakers. This flow of food must be organized, tracked, distributed, stored for lean periods, protected from theft and spoilage. An organization requires marks, seals on storage jars, seals on distribution records, seals that say this was counted or this was allocated or this was received. Your work connects to hunger, to survival, not directly, not dramatically, but through the invisible chains of administration, through the quiet systems that keep 40,000 people fed. If the sealing system failed, food distribution would become chaotic. Arguments would multiply, theft would increase, trust would erode, the city itself would be threatened. So your boring craft, drilling holes, carving stone, testing impressions, carries weight beyond its visible simplicity. You are making tools that prevent chaos, that maintain the fragile order required for dense populations to function. The temple households recognize this. They commission seals regularly. They pay well for quality work. They understand that good seals save them trouble, that clear impressions prevent disputes, that distinct designs deter forgery. You benefit from this understanding. You make a living. You support your household. You acquire some respect. Not the respect given to priests or administrators, but solid recognition of useful skill. The city's innovation extends beyond seals and writing. Architecture is changing. Mud brick construction is becoming more sophisticated. Platforms are rising higher. Buildings are spanning larger spaces. Decoration is becoming more elaborate. Potters are developing new vessel forms. Metalworkers are experimenting with alloys. Weavers are creating finer textiles. Each craft is advancing because specialists can focus deeply, can try variations, can share techniques with other specialists. This acceleration of innovation is another city effect. Density creates interaction. Interaction creates exchange. Exchange creates improvement. Improvement attracts more people. More people create more density. Uruk is living through the early stages of this acceleration. Future cities will grow even larger. Will develop even more sophisticated systems. Will create even more specialized roles. But those future cities will build on foundations being laid now, in this moment, in this place, by people like you who are inventing the technologies that make urban life possible. You do not know you are inventing. You think you are just doing your job, making seals, carving stone, satisfying clients. But your work is part of a transformation, a shift from villages to cities, from personal memory to external record, from face-to-face trust to institutional verification. And thousands of years from now, archaeologists will dig through Uruk's ruins. They will find your seals, or seals like yours, and they will reconstruct this moment, this transformation, this invention of urban civilization. They will call it the urban revolution. They will debate when it started, why it started, what factors drove it. But you, living through it, experience it as normal life, as daily work, as the world you know. This is how revolutions usually feel from inside. Not revolutionary, just life. The sun rises higher. The city warms. The day's work continues. And Uruk, the first true city, keeps functioning. Kept functioning by thousands of small systems working together, including the small system of cylinder seals, including your hands, including the quiet discipline of carving identity into stone. Roll, lift, the impression appears, clear, distinct, recognizable, and the city continues, one sealed jar at a time, one verified transaction at a time, one maintained trust at a time. This is how cities survive, not through grand gestures, through countless small acts of verification, through boring reliability, through seals that work. A client does not arrive with banners. They arrive with expectation. A merchant, perhaps, someone who moves goods, or an official attached to a storehouse, someone who needs proof, not persuasion. They speak softly. Not because they are kind, because this is the kind of work that invites silence. They bring a small piece of clay, still damp, and press it lightly between fingers. A test surface, a place where an impression can be tried. And the request is simple. I need a seal that is mine. Not beautiful, though beauty is often welcomed. Not large, because the seal must be carried. Distinct, recognizable, hard to imitate. Because seals are used as security against unauthorized opening. A broken sealing or a different impression means someone tampered. So the client's calm voice contains a small fear that a jar could be opened, a basket could be emptied, a door could be unsealed, and the blame could float through the storeroom like dust. They do not want dust. They want certainty. And in Uruk, certainty can be rolled into clay. You show the client a few blanks. Not many. You do not overwhelm with options. A pale stone cylinder already roughly shaped. A darker one denser. A piece with fine grain that takes detail well. Cylinder seals were often made from stone, including precious stones, valued both for durability and status. The seal is both tool and object of identity. You do not promise immortality, but you choose a stone that can withstand rolling again and again on clay, because seals are not used once. They are used repeatedly, on jars, on doors, on baskets, on tablets, where the same identity must appear consistently. When the client touches the blank, they feel the weight, the coolness, the quiet seriousness of it. You see their expression soften a little. This is not an abstract purchase. It is a piece of their authority made small enough to wear. The stone cylinder in your hand did not originate in Uruk. It came from somewhere else, somewhere distant, through networks you participate in but do not fully see. This is the paradox of your craft. Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, is extraordinarily fertile, perfect for growing grain, rich with clay for pottery and construction, blessed with water for irrigation, but poor in stone, very poor in stone. The alluvial plains produce almost no workable stone, no granite, no marble, no good source of the hard stones needed for cylinder seals. If you want stone, it must come from elsewhere. So it does. Through trade networks that extend hundreds of miles, through merchant relationships that span generations, through economic systems that connect Uruk to places you will never see. The deep blue stone called lapis lazuli, the most prized seal material, originates from mountains far to the northeast, in territories that will one day be called Afghanistan, perhaps 600 miles away, perhaps more depending on the route. You have never been to those mountains. You never will. But you have worked lapis lazuli many times. You know its weight, its color, its response to your tools. You know how it splits, how it polishes, how it captures light. Someone mines that stone in distant mountains. Someone transports it, probably through multiple exchanges, westward. Someone eventually brings it to Uruk. Someone sells it to stone dealers. And finally, you purchase a blank prepared from that stone. The chain involves perhaps 10 or more transactions, each adding cost, each adding risk, each depending on trust that the material is genuine, fairly traded, properly handled. By the time lapis reaches your workshop, its price reflects this entire chain. A good lapis blank might cost equivalent to a month of ordinary wages, maybe more for larger pieces or exceptionally clear material. Only wealthy clients can afford lapis seals. Temple officials, successful merchants, heads of large households, people for whom the seal is both functional tool and status symbol. When you carve a lapis seal, you work more carefully than usual, not because the client is watching, though they often are, because the material itself demands respect, because failure means destroying value that crossed 600 miles to reach your hands. Another imported stone is carnelian, the warm red-orange stone favored for its color and durability. Carnelian originates from regions that will one day be called the Indus Valley, even farther than Afghanistan, perhaps 1,000 miles or more. The trade routes that bring carnelian are maritime as well as overland. Ships sailing the Persian Gulf, coastal traders moving goods from port to port, eventually reaching Mesopotamian cities through river connections. You have seen carnelian seals in various shades, pale orange, deep red, sometimes banded with different colors. Each piece carries the geological signature of distant lands. Each piece represents successful long-distance trade. Diorite, a dark, hard stone, comes from mountains in what will one day be called Oman, Arabian Peninsula sources. This stone is exceptionally durable, difficult to work, but produces seals that can be used thousands of times without wearing down. Clients who need institutional seals, seals used daily for years, often choose diorite. The initial cost is higher. The carving time is longer, but the seal outlasts softer stones by years. You charge more for diorite work, not because you are greedy, because the tool wear is greater, because the time required is substantially longer, because the skill demands are higher. Hard stone fights you, requires more patience, more abrasive, more frequent tool changes. Steatite, a softer stone, originates closer, perhaps from Iranian sources several hundred miles away. Still imported, still traded, but less costly than lapis or carnelian. Steatite carves easily, almost too easily. The design can become too fluid, too soft. The challenge with steatite is achieving crispness, making edges sharp enough that the impression reads clearly. Some clients prefer steatite for quick commissions, for backup seals, for training young apprentices who might make mistakes. The economic logic is sound. Why risk expensive lapis when learning basic techniques? You occasionally work steatite for practice yourself, testing new design approaches, experimenting with tool angles, refining techniques before applying them to precious materials. The stone trade also brings obsidian from Anatolian sources, volcanic glass, black, glassy, beautiful when polished, but brittle, risky. A seal dropped once can shatter completely. You avoid obsidian commissions when possible. The material is too unforgiving. Too many ways for disaster to strike. One shock, one temperature change, one hidden flaw, and weeks of work become fragments. But some clients insist. They want the appearance, the dark elegance, the way obsidian catches light. So you work it, slowly, carefully, with constant worry. Beyond these main materials, occasional seals use shells, bone, ivory, copper, even gold or silver for the extremely wealthy. But stone dominates. Stone lasts. Stone survives. Stone carries weight, literally and symbolically. The stone dealers you purchase from maintain networks you only partially understand. They have relationships with distant suppliers. They know which caravans are arriving, which ships are docking, which materials will be available when. You visit dealers regularly, not always to purchase, sometimes just to see what has arrived, to understand current availability, to hear rumors about supply disruptions or new sources. These relationships matter. A dealer who trusts you might reserve especially fine blanks, might give you first choice when rare materials arrive, might extend credit during lean periods. You build trust through consistency, through paying reliably, through never complaining about fair prices, through understanding that dealers face their own uncertainties. Sometimes a dealer shows you a particularly exceptional piece, not because they expect you to buy immediately, but because they want your professional opinion, your assessment of how it might work, whether it would appeal to high-status clients. This consultation benefits both of you. The dealer learns market intelligence. You see materials before competitors. The relationship strengthens. You also maintain relationships with blank preparers, artisans who specialize in shaping rough stone into cylinder forms. They do the initial heavy work, selecting pieces, cutting them to size, creating the basic cylindrical form. This specialization makes sense. Their tools are different from yours. Their skills are different. They work in volume, producing many blanks for many engravers. You work in detail, personalizing each blank for each client. Some seal engravers prepare their own blanks, starting from raw stone, doing every step themselves. This provides maximum control, but it is time-consuming. And time spent preparing blanks is time not spent engraving, the higher-value work. You purchase prepared blanks most of the time, but you can prepare your own when necessary. When a client has special requirements, when the available blanks do not suit your needs, when you want to work unusual materials. The tools for blank preparation are heavy, saws for rough cutting, large abrasives for shaping, equipment that requires force rather than finesse. You keep these tools but use them rarely. Blank preparers also drill the initial bore holes, not to final precision, just a rough channel that you will finish. This initial boring removes most of the difficult center material, leaves you with refinement work rather than heavy removal. The cooperation between blank preparers and seal engravers is another example of specialization's benefits. Each person focuses on their strength. Each person produces higher quality at lower cost than if everyone did everything. The imported materials carry risks beyond price, quality variation, hidden flaws, material degradation during transport, fraud. You have learned to inspect blanks carefully before purchasing, looking for cracks, testing hardness, checking color consistency, rejecting pieces that seem wrong. Sometimes your suspicion is correct. A lapis blank that is actually colored steatite. A carnelian that has been heated to enhance color, making it brittle. A diorite that is actually a softer stone that has been treated to appear harder. Stone dealers with good reputations reject such materials, but dishonest dealers exist, especially dealers working with intermediaries who do not inspect carefully, or dealers desperate to move inventory during slow periods. You remember your master's advice: a stone that lies today will crack tomorrow. Meaning, if the material claims to be something it is not, it will eventually reveal its true nature through failure. And when a seal fails, cracking during carving or wearing excessively during use, your reputation suffers. Even if the material was fraudulent, even if you could not have known, the client blames you. Other clients hear about it. Commissions decline. So you are cautious with materials, conservative, willing to pay slightly more to dealers you trust, willing to reject good prices from dealers you do not know. This caution is professional survival, not paranoia, not pessimism, just accurate risk assessment. The most expensive blank you ever purchased was a large lapis cylinder, exceptionally clear blue, almost no white calcite inclusions, which are common in lapis, perfectly sized, already well-formed. The cost was equivalent to perhaps 3 months of ordinary wages. You hesitated. The investment was substantial. If you made any mistake during carving, the loss would hurt for a long time. But the dealer assured you a temple official was commissioning a special seal, a seal for the highest administrator, a seal that would be seen by many people, used on the most important documents. You trusted the dealer. You purchased the blank. You carved it over many days, testing each cut, rolling impressions constantly, correcting obsessively. The finished seal was perhaps the finest work you have ever done. The lapis blue, the design crisp, the impression perfect. The client paid extremely well. Your reputation was elevated among temple officials. That one commission covered your cost for several months, proved you could handle the highest quality work, established relationships that led to many future commissions. But it all depended on the material, on lapis that traveled 600 miles, through trade networks you did not manage, through economic systems you participated in but did not control. This is the reality of your craft in Uruk. You cannot work without imported materials. You cannot obtain imported materials without functioning trade networks. You cannot ensure trade network reliability through your own actions alone. So you participate. You purchase. You assess. You adapt. You maintain relationships. You build reputation. You work carefully to avoid wasting precious materials that crossed mountains and deserts to reach your hands. The stone in your palm carries invisible history, geological history, formed over millions of years in specific conditions, trade history, moved through human networks over months or years, economic history, valued, priced, exchanged multiple times before reaching you. And now craft history, about to be transformed from generic blank to personalized identity, from geological accident to cultural tool, from imported commodity to local signature. You set the stone on your work surface. Begin the process. The long, patient transformation from raw material to finished seal. From distant mountain to Uruk identity. From trade good to trust technology. The stone does not care about its journey. It is just stone. But you carry awareness of its origins. Respect for the networks that brought it. Understanding that your craft depends on connections far beyond your workshop. Beyond your city. Beyond your direct experience. This awareness grounds your work, makes you careful, makes you grateful, makes you understand that the boring task of drilling and carving connects you to vast systems, to distant peoples, to the slow miracle of human cooperation across hundreds of miles, across multiple languages, across different political organizations, all made possible by trade, by trust, by marks impressed in clay that verify promises made by people who never meet face to face. Your seals help maintain that trust, and that trust brings you materials, and those materials enable your seals. A circle, self-supporting, fragile but functional, ancient but new, simple but profound. You pick up the drill, begin the bore. The stone resists, but slowly, with patience and abrasive and steady rhythm, the stone yields, and the transformation begins. Before the design there is the whole. Because a seal that cannot be carried is a seal that will be forgotten. Many seals have a central bore and were worn on a string, making them available like a tool always kept close. The drilling is patient work. It is also technical work. The evidence from lapidary studies shows that bores were often drilled from the ends, tapering toward the center, and sometimes required filing inside the bore to join/widen the drilled sections. You set the blank carefully. You prepare your drill, wood or stone components, a drill tip chosen for the task. You prepare abrasive, fine gritty powder that does the true cutting. Penn's lapidary research documents drilling techniques using different drill tips, including wood, flint, tubular drills, combined with abrasives, supported by replication and microscopic analysis. Now you begin. The drill turns. Not fast, steady. The abrasive whispers. The lamp's light stays warm and constant. You stop often to check alignment, because a crooked bore ruins the feel of the seal when it is rolled. And a seal that rolls poorly becomes a daily annoyance, the kind that makes people impatient. You do not want impatience around identity, so you take your time. Only after the bore is true do you begin the real signature. You do not draw a picture the way a painter draws. You cut into stone, intaglio, so that the impression will rise in relief when rolled. Museums emphasize that seals are carved so impressions read properly and function like identification marks. And the strangest part, the part apprentices struggle to accept, is that the design must be conceived in reverse, because the world will not see the seal itself most of the time. The world will see what the seal leaves behind: a rolled impression on damp clay, a continuous band of imagery, a moment where identity becomes visible, then dries, then hardens into record. So you hold the cylinder close. You turn it slowly in your fingers, and you begin the first shallow cuts, guidelines more than lines. You keep your hand light, because in stone the first mistake is expensive. You lean into the craft's calm rule. Go slowly enough that you never have to force correction. The client watches. They do not speak. The lamp flickers once, then steadies. And your tools begin to make the smallest, cleanest sound. A soft scratch, a controlled scrape, a patient removal of dust. Before the design deepens, you prepare what truly shapes stone. Not force, not speed, but paste. Fine abrasive grit mixed with a little water. When you stir it with a small tool, it becomes a dull, sandy slurry, thick enough to stay where you place it, thin enough to move under pressure. This is a quiet truth that most people never learn. The drill is only the carrier. The abrasive is the cutter. Lapidary research on ancient drilling emphasizes the role of abrasives and tool tips. Wood, flint, tubular drill methods, documented through replication and microscopic analysis. You spread a thin layer on the slab. You keep the bowl nearby. You add water sparingly. Too much water makes the grit float away. Too little makes it bite unevenly and heat too quickly. So you keep it steady. A controlled mixture for a controlled day. You return to the seal blank. The bore is true. The surface is smooth. Now your task is to carve an image that can be recognized not on stone, but on clay. Because the point of a cylinder seal is the impression. A continuous scene rolled onto wet clay to mark identity and authority. So you do not chase complexity. You chase legibility. Your first cuts are shallow. Guide cuts. They do not commit you fully yet. They exist to answer one question. When this is rolled, will it be understood? You carve with the discipline of reversal. You think mirror thinking. You imagine the clay reading the opposite of what your eyes see. You pause to turn the cylinder. You check spacing. You check how the image wraps without breaking. This is the engraver's calm intelligence, not loud creativity, quiet clarity. The client's request guides the image. A merchant wants one kind of authority. A storehouse official wants another. A temple institution worker wants another still. In the Uruk administrative world, seals are closely tied to accounting and control, rolled on ceilings for containers and documents. So you choose motifs that signal, this belongs to me and I am allowed. Not a personal diary. Not a romantic portrait. A functional emblem. A repeatable identity. You do not claim to know every symbol's meaning. Some are widely discussed. Others remain debated. You keep your story honest. What matters is that the motif is distinctive enough to identify the owner in the daily flow of goods. That is the first office reality. Most of human writing begins as control and counting, not poetry. And seals are part of that same control technology. Now comes a small ritual that is not religious but feels important. The test roll. You take a lump of damp clay. You flatten it gently. You breathe once. Then you set the seal down and roll. Slow. Even pressure. No wobble. The cylinder turns and the impression appears like a quiet revelation, an image emerging as the stone moves forward. This is why cylinder seals are extraordinary. They produce a continuous band of design in one motion, functioning like a repeatable signature. You lift the seal. You examine the clay. And you do what a professional does. You don't admire first. You evaluate. Are lines too shallow? Are details filling with clay? Does the image read from left to right? Does anything blur when rolled? You hold the clay closer to the lamp. Warm light reveals shallow impressions. Deep shadow reveals where cuts are too deep. And you find the first place that needs correction. A beginner carves for the object. A master carves for the impression. So you cut with the clay in mind. You deepen a line slightly. You widen a groove where the clay keeps filling. You simplify one detail that looks elegant on stone but turns into a dark smear in the impression. This is not compromise. It is function. Because seals exist to mark and secure goods, meaning they must be legible and consistent in daily use. You test again. You roll again. You compare impressions like an accountant compares totals, until the design becomes reliably readable. This is the real office discipline of the engraver. Repeat until it works every time. Before the day ends, you let the client see the seal do its job. Not as performance, as proof. A jar is prepared. A stopper is placed. A cord is tied tight around the neck. Then a lump of damp clay is pressed over the cord. And the seal is rolled across the clay, creating a mark that will break if the jar is opened. Seal impressions on clay were used as a tamper-evident security measure on containers and closures. You watch the client's face. This is the moment they understand what they paid for, not a tiny stone sculpture. The technology of trust. In the broader Uruk administrative tradition, sealings and record-keeping developed together, goods controlled, transactions recorded, identity impressed. The client nods. They do not need more explanation. They see the impression. They see the promise. They see the security. Now that the seal is real, the fear becomes real too. A seal can be stolen. A seal can be lost. A seal can be copied, if someone is skilled and has time. These are quiet fears, not dramatic ones. Because identity tools create their own risks. That is why people often carry seals close to the body, threaded on a cord through the central bore. The client touches the seal's hole. They imagine it on a cord. They imagine it safe under cloth. They imagine reaching for it many times each day. You do not say, "Be careful." They already know. You say only what a craftsperson can promise. The bore is true. The impression is clear. The stone is durable. The design is distinct. And you remind them, without drama, that a seal is not only an object. It is responsibility. In this time and place, you do not receive a commission from an emperor or a pharaoh. Those titles belong to other worlds. In Uruk, the high client is usually an institution, a temple household, a major storehouse, an administrator, a high official whose authority must be recognized in clay. They arrive with fewer words, with more certainty. Their request is not personal vanity. It is operational, a seal that will be used many times a day, on jar sealings, on door sealings, on baskets, and sometimes on documents, so everyone knows who authorized this. When you agree to the commission, you are not only carving stone. You are shaping a tool that will regulate movement, goods moving, messages moving, responsibility moving. And the client's quiet expectation is clear. This mark must be unmistakable. Because if it is not, the city becomes noisy. You do not need to invent a battlefield to feel political pressure. In an early city, politics lives in. Who controls storerooms, who controls labor, who controls distribution, who can claim legitimate authority. The Uruk period is characterized by symbolic technology, signs, numbers, standardization, and administrative tools that function as a technology of social control. Cylinder seals belong to that same world. And the art of the period often emphasizes authority figures and controlled humans. Some scenes show processions, prisoners, and domination motifs interpreted cautiously, which signals that power and coercion are part of the mental landscape even when we cannot reconstruct specific events day by day. So when your high client wants a seal, it is not only for convenience. It is for clarity in a world where clarity prevents conflict. This jar was closed by us. This door was sealed by us. This tablet was authorized by us. And because seals were explicitly used to identify authority and protect against unauthorized opening, the impression becomes both identity and security. You prepare a new test surface, not just a lump of clay, a thin layer shaped like a cover, a clay skin that can wrap or seal. In the Uruk administrative tradition, seals were used not only on sealings for containers and doors, but also on clay tablets and even clay envelopes, a practice described in major summaries of the period's administration. You keep the story honest. At Uruk, 3300 to 3000 BCE, the strongest evidence is sealing in administrative contexts, goods and documents within the early accounting system. Later, sealing expands across many document types. Museum explanations discuss letters/receipts/treaties being sealed in later phases of Mesopotamian history. But even here in this early world, the concept is the same. Clay is a guard. A seal impression is the guard's face. If the envelope is broken, it is visible. If a sealing is broken, it is visible. That visibility is why people trust the system. Not because people are virtuous, because the clay makes dishonesty inconvenient. Now you reach into the older layer beneath writing, still present in this era. A hollow clay ball, a bullae. Inside it, tokens can be enclosed, counting goods without writing full words. The outside is sealed all over with cylinder seal impressions so that opening it becomes obvious. This is the calm genius of early administration. Keep the count safe. Make tampering visible. Allow verification later. So in your workshop, when you roll an impression on a curved bullae surface, you feel the physical meaning of authority, not a speech. A surface that says, "This is closed under a name." And again, your job is small enough to fit in the hand but strong enough to protect a whole chain of trust. A seal works because it is distinct, but the world contains ambitious eyes. Someone might try to imitate a design. Someone might carve a rough copy. Someone might steal the seal itself. Your client knows this, which is why they choose complexity where it matters. A motif that wraps uniquely, or a rhythm of lines that is hard to reproduce, small details that act like private tells when rolled into clay. You do not pretend counterfeiting disappears. You engineer against it. You cut the design with intention, deep enough to read, not so deep that the clay becomes a blob, distinct enough that a hurried copy looks wrong. This is how an engraver serves security without calling it security. And it stays calm because the work is calm. The defense is in the details. Sometimes the most dangerous counterfeit is not a copy. It is the original seal in the wrong hand. Seals are portable and worn, commonly on a cord through the bore, so they can be used repeatedly wherever needed. Portability is power. It is also risk. A seal can be borrowed. A seal can be taken. A seal can be used to close a jar that should never be closed, or to authorize a transaction that benefits the wrong person. We have later textual evidence that seals could be used by subordinates or relatives when the owner's seal was not available, showing how authorized use by someone else is a real administrative phenomenon, even if this particular written example is later than Uruk. So your high client may request a secondary control, a specific pattern, a second sealing, or a rule: only certain people touch the seal. Again, not romantic, operational, because the seal is not decoration, it is a lever. By midday, the lamp has done its work. The room smells faintly of oil and stone dust. The surface of the seal feels warmer now, not hot, but changed by hours of touch. You deepen the last cuts carefully. Then you polish, not to make it shiny, to make it roll smoothly. A seal that catches on clay produces uneven impressions. Uneven impressions create arguments. So you run the cylinder gently on a polishing surface. You wipe it. You roll one last test impression on damp clay. slow, even. The image appears as a continuous band. This is the defining utility of cylinder seals and why they function like signatures on ceilings and documents. You hold the impression near the light. You check the tells. You check legibility. You check that the identity is unmistakable. And when it is, you stop. Because the work is done when it works every time. The high client does not ask you to show it off. They ask you to use it. So you follow them, quietly, to a place where authority is physical. A storeroom door, not decorative. Heavy wood, rope, a latch. A seam that should not open without permission. A small lump of damp clay is pressed over the knot where cord meets latch. It is soft. It holds shape. And for a moment it looks like nothing, just a thumb-sized mound. Then the client takes the seal. They roll it slowly across the clay. The impression appears, a band of lines and figures and rhythm. Not loud, just certain. Now the door has a visible truth. If someone opens it, the clay will break. If someone reseals it with a different seal, the impression will not match. This is the daily purpose of your craft. Not beauty first, security first. The calm kind of security that prevents arguments before they begin. Next comes the jar. The jar is ordinary. The contents are not always ordinary. Grain, resin, or something meant for redistribution, measured, recorded, and watched. A stopper is set. Cord is tied. Clay is pressed over the knot. The client rolls the seal again. One steady motion. A complete band of identity. This is where the listener should feel the repetitive comfort. Seal, roll, lift, seal, roll, lift. In a busy institution, this action might happen dozens of times in a day. And every time it happens, it is a small promise. This was closed under authority. This was not opened in secret. This belongs to the system. Your role is upstream from all of it. Because if the seal is poorly carved, the impression is unclear. If the impression is unclear, someone can argue. An argument is what seals are built to reduce. After the first few sealings, you watch for what matters. Not the client's mood, the imprint's behavior. You check. Does the impression fill cleanly without smearing? Are the key tells visible, the unique small details? Does the band align well when rolled without a confusing overlap? Does the seal roll smoothly without catching? This is not vanity. This is risk management. Because if the seal is easy to imitate, the institution loses control. If the seal is easy to forge, the door might look closed when it has been opened. So you build defenses quietly, a small asymmetry that doesn't look like a mistake but proves authenticity. A repeated micro-pattern that a hurried copy will miss. Depth differences that roll cleanly only when carved correctly. You do not describe this to the client like a lecture. You simply nod when they ask, "Is it distinct enough?" And you answer in a calm craftsperson way, "It will read clearly," meaning it will do its job. When the delivery is complete, you return alone, or nearly alone. Uruk continues its day. You hear water being poured, footsteps, a distant call that you do not follow. But your work pulls you back into a quieter world. Your workbench, your tools, your lamp. This is part of why the profession is surprisingly sleep-friendly. Even though the seal is about control and administration, the making of it is private, repetitive, and slow. You sit. You wipe dust from your fingers. You clean the grit bowl. You keep your tools where you can find them without thinking. Because thinking too hard at night keeps people awake. And you, like anyone who works steadily, prefer the calm of a prepared workspace. No craft stays excellent without maintenance. You check the drill cord. You check the drill tip. You smooth the work surface. You separate the abrasives, coarser grit for shaping, finer for finishing. You keep the stone dust from becoming a film over everything. A lamp's smoke leaves its own residue, so you wipe the area near the flame. Not obsessively, just enough. The smell of the workshop is a blend: stone dust, warm oil, wood, and the faint dampness of clay used for test rolls. You cover the finished seal. You set it aside with the seriousness it deserves, because you understand what it is now: a portable authority, a tool that will be handled often, a thing that will be blamed if anything goes wrong. so you treat it as carefully as you treat your own hands. Before you can carve stone, you must create the tools that carve stone, or acquire them, or maintain them. The tools themselves require craft, require knowledge, require patience. A seal engraver's toolkit is modest in number but critical in quality. Each tool serves specific functions. Each tool demands particular care. Together they enable the work. Without them, even the most skilled hands are useless. The copper chisel is your workhorse, used for removing material quickly, for rough shaping, for cutting away larger sections. Copper is soft enough to shape but hard enough to work stone, especially when used with abrasives. You acquired your first copper chisel from a metal worker, specified the size, the thickness, the angle you wanted. The smith forged it from copper traded into Uruk, shaped it, ground it, sold it to you for perhaps a week's worth of grain equivalent. But that was years ago. The chisel has worn. The edge has changed shape through use and resharpening. The copper has compressed and hardened from repeated striking. It is no longer the chisel you purchased. It has become your chisel, shaped by your use, adapted to your hands. Eventually it will wear beyond usefulness, become too short, too deformed, too soft from metal fatigue. Then you will purchase a new one, and the cycle will begin again. Tools are consumable. They give their substance to your work. They sacrifice themselves for the seals. The pointed copper gravers are more specialized. Two of them, identical in size but developing different characteristics through use. One has been sharpened more aggressively, cuts deeper but wears faster, used for dramatic lines, for shadows, for emphasis. The other retains a finer point, cuts shallower but with more precision, used for detail work, for fine lines, for subtle texture. You do not plan this differentiation consciously. It emerges through use, through many sharpenings, through the accidental evolution of tools shaped by work. You sharpen these gravers yourself, not every day, but frequently, perhaps every 3 or 4 days of active carving. The sharpening process is meditative, grinding the tool against a whetstone, feeling the metal transform, seeing the edge emerge, testing the sharpness with your thumb, not pressing hard enough to cut, just sensing the edge quality. The whetstone itself requires attention. It is stone, but stone that wears, that develops grooves where tools are sharpened repeatedly in the same spot. You must rotate your sharpening position, use different areas of the stone, keep the surface relatively level. Otherwise the grooves become deep. The stone becomes ineffective, must be replaced. Whetstones come from specific sources, not local, imported like most good stone, from regions with particular geological characteristics. The ideal whetstone has fine, even grain, sufficient hardness to sharpen copper but not so hard that it glazes, sufficient porosity to hold water but not so porous that it crumbles. A good whetstone might last years. A poor whetstone might last months. The cost difference seems small initially, but over time the economics favor quality. So you purchase good whetstones. Keep them carefully. Use them respectfully. The borer, the drill, is perhaps your most complex tool. Not a single piece, a system. Multiple components working together. Wood shaft, stone or copper drill bit, cord or bow for rotation, abrasive paste, all coordinated through your hands into functional drilling mechanism. The wood shaft must be straight, balanced, comfortable to grip. Hardwood is preferred. Cedar if available. Durable woods that do not split easily, that can withstand repeated rotation, that maintain their form despite moisture and temperature changes. You shaped your current drill shaft yourself. Started with a branch, rough diameter, removed bark, carved it gradually more precise, more cylindrical, more balanced. Checked balance by rolling it on a flat surface. Perfect balance means it rolls straight without wobbling. The effort took days, but the result is a tool that works smoothly, that does not introduce vibration, that allows controlled drilling. The time investment was worthwhile. Good tools make good work possible. The drill bits are consumable. They wear, they break, they dull. You replace them regularly, perhaps once per month if you are drilling frequently, perhaps less if work is slow. Copper bits work well for softer stones. They are easy to obtain, relatively cheap, can be shaped to different sizes. but they wear quickly, especially on harder stones like lapis or diorite. Flint bits last longer on hard stones. The flint is harder than copper, removes stone more efficiently, but flint is more brittle, more likely to fracture if alignment is wrong, more difficult to shape to precise dimensions. You use both types depending on circumstances. Copper for speed and convenience, flint for durability when working tough materials. The choice reflects judgment about trade-offs. No perfect solution exists, only contextual decisions. The abrasive paste is where actual cutting happens. The drill bit is just a carrier, a way to deliver abrasive to the work surface, a way to apply pressure in circular motion. The abrasive does the grinding, does the removing, does the work. You prepare abrasive paste from powdered stone. Quartz dust is common, ground very fine, mixed with water to create slurry. The consistency matters enormously. Too thin and it flows away. Too thick and it cakes. The right consistency stays where placed but flows under pressure. You grind your own abrasive sometimes, using hard stones, a mortar and pestle arrangement, crushing, grinding, creating progressively finer powder. This work is tedious, tiring, but it produces abrasive you trust, abrasive you know is consistent, abrasive that performs predictably. Other times you purchase pre-ground abrasive from specialists, people who grind abrasives in quantity, who maintain different grades, who supply engravers and other stone workers. The purchased abrasive is convenient, but variable in quality. You must test each batch, verify it performs adequately. The cord used for bow drilling must be strong but not thick, flexible but not stretchy. It carries the rotational force from your arm motion to the drill shaft. If it slips, drilling fails. If it breaks, drilling stops. You replace cords regularly, perhaps every few weeks, before they actually fail. Because cord failure mid-drilling can damage work, can scratch stone, can ruin hours of effort. Preventive replacement costs little, prevents expensive failures. The workshop itself requires maintenance beyond tools. The work surface must remain clean. Stone dust accumulates constantly, gets into everything. Scratches can develop on work surfaces from careless tool placement, from dropped stones, from accumulated grit. You clean daily, wiping surfaces, removing dust, checking for problems. This cleanliness is not obsessive tidiness. It is professional necessity. A clean workspace produces better work, reduces errors, prevents contamination. The lamp is essential. You work primarily by daylight when possible. Natural light is better for seeing detail, for assessing impressions, for identifying problems. But sometimes commissions require evening work, or clouds reduce daylight, or seasons shorten days. Then the lamp becomes critical. You maintain lamp oil supply, keep wicks trimmed, position the lamp carefully to avoid shadows that hide detail. Work more slowly by lamplight because depth perception is harder, because shadows are less informative, because errors are easier. Your tools live in a reed basket when not in use. Not fancy storage, just practical protection. Keeps tools together, prevents loss, reduces damage from moisture or temperature changes. The basket itself is ordinary, woven by someone who makes hundreds of similar baskets, but it serves your purpose adequately. You check tools at the start of each day. Brief inspection, visual examination, touch testing. Do any tools need sharpening? Are any handles loose? Is anything damaged? This morning check prevents discovering problems mid-work, prevents interrupting carving to fix tool issues. When problems are discovered, you address them immediately. Do not defer. Do not tell yourself you'll fix it later. Later means forgetting, means starting work with defective tools, means producing inferior results or wasting time mid-task. Some tool maintenance requires outside help. If a copper chisel breaks rather than just wearing down, you need a metalworker. You cannot forge copper yourself. You lack equipment, lack specific knowledge. So you take the broken tool to a smith, describe what you need, wait while they forge a replacement. These specialist relationships matter. The metalworker knows your needs, makes tools that work for your hands, understands your preferences. In return, you pay promptly. Refer other craftspeople. Maintain the relationship that serves both parties. Similarly, when you need new whetstones, you purchase from suppliers who specialize in grinding stones, who understand what makes good whetstones, who source from reliable quarries, who test their materials. You could theoretically find your own whetstones, travel to source areas, select stones yourself, but the time cost would be enormous. The expertise required is different from seal engraving. The division of labor makes sense. You focus on your craft, others focus on theirs. Everyone benefits from specialization. The workshop space itself is simple. Mud brick walls, reed roof, packed earth floor. Nothing fancy, but adequate. The walls provide shade. The roof blocks rain. The floor is level enough for work. You do not own this space. You occupy it through arrangement. The payment is modest. The security is reasonable. The location is convenient, close to Temple District where many clients are, close to markets where materials are purchased, close to home where you sleep. Some seal engravers work from home. Use a corner of their house as workshop. This reduces costs, eliminates separation between work and living, but it also means clients visit your private space, means work never fully stops, means household activities can disrupt work. You prefer separation. Workspace separate from living space. When you leave the workshop, work ends. When you enter home, family life begins. The boundary helps maintain balance, helps prevent work from consuming everything. Your workshop has one window, open to allow light and air, covered with a mat during bad weather or at night. The window orientation matters. Morning light is best for detail work. Afternoon light becomes harsh, creates glare. You plan difficult carving for morning when conditions are optimal. The floor near your work position shows wear. Paths where you walk frequently. The spot where you sit shows compressed earth. The spots where you set stones repeatedly show slight depressions. The workshop is shaped by use, by thousands of repeated actions over years. It bears your mark as much as you mark the seals you create. This shaping is not intentional, not designed, but it is real, and it makes the space yours, even though you do not own it. Even though someday you will leave and another craftsperson will occupy it, currently it reflects you, your rhythms, your patterns, your work. Tool maintenance is boring. Workshop cleaning is tedious. Material preparation is unglamorous, but all of it is essential. All of it enables the visible work, the seals, the impressions, the identity marks that verify transactions and maintain trust. When a seal works perfectly, when an impression is clear and distinct and recognizable, dozens of invisible supporting actions made it possible. Sharp tools, clean workspace, prepared abrasives, maintained equipment, boring infrastructure. This is true for most craft. The visible result depends on invisible foundation. The impressive outcome requires unimpressive preparation. The dramatic moment rests on mundane routine. You have accepted this, embraced it even. The preparation is not separate from the craft. The preparation is the craft. The discipline of maintenance is what separates professionals from amateurs. The willingness to do boring work excellently is what creates the capacity for interesting work. So you clean, you sharpen, you prepare, you maintain, you check, you repair, you replace, day after day, year after year. The quiet work that enables the visible work. The unsexy discipline that produces the celebrated results. And when a client praises a seal you carved, when they marvel at the clarity, the detail, the distinctiveness, you accept the praise. But you know the truth. The seal's quality began with clean tools, with sharp edges, with prepared abrasives, with maintained equipment, with boring, patient attention to foundation. This is the craftsperson's secret. This is what distinguishes reliable professionals from erratic amateurs. Not talent, not inspiration, discipline, routine, maintenance, the willingness to do unsexy work with the same care given to visible work. Your hands finish today's maintenance tasks. Tools are sharpened. Workspace is clean. Materials are prepared. Tomorrow's work can begin immediately. No delays. No discoveries of problems. Just smooth transition from preparation to execution. This is how good work happens. Not through drama, through discipline, not through inspiration, through preparation, not through genius, through maintenance. Roll, lift, the impression appears. Clear. because the tools were sharp, because the workspace was clean, because the boring work was done excellently, because foundations were solid. When you go home, your hands still carry grit in the skin lines. You wash, not perfectly. Stonework leaves traces. Home is not a palace. It is shelter, mud brick walls, a woven mat, a jar of water. Food is modest. Grain, a thicker bowl of something warm, a little oil if the household has it. A seal engraver in Uruk lives comfortably, not wealthily, not struggling, somewhere in the middle. The comfortable middle where skilled craftspeople usually reside. This comfort is not accidental. It reflects supply and demand, reflects the value urban society places on verification technology, reflects the number of people who can carve seals compared to the number of seals needed. The demand for cylinder seals is substantial, perhaps more substantial than people outside the administrative systems realize. Every merchant needs a seal. Every official needs a seal. Every household head managing significant goods needs a seal. Even some slaves conducting business on behalf of owners need seals. Based on archaeological estimates suggesting 200,000 seals might still be buried from the Uruk period alone, and considering how many have been destroyed or lost over millennia, the original production was enormous. Perhaps dozens of seal engravers work in Uruk at any given time, perhaps more. Each one handling multiple commissions per month, each one training apprentices who will eventually add to the supply. Yet demand continues growing as the city grows, as administrative complexity increases, as trade expands. You receive perhaps 3 to 5 commissions per month, sometimes more during busy periods, sometimes fewer during slow seasons, but averaging enough to sustain your household and maintain reserves. For a simple seal in soft stone, steatite or limestone, you charge perhaps equivalent to 2 weeks of ordinary labor wages. This covers your time, perhaps 3 days of work, your materials, the blank, abrasives, tool wear, and your skill, years of training enabling quality work. The client could not produce the seal themselves. They lack training, lack tools, lack knowledge of materials and techniques. So they pay for your expertise, and the payment seems fair to both parties. You receive adequate compensation. They receive reliable service. For a complex seal in precious stone, lapis lazuli with detailed design, the price multiplies substantially, perhaps equivalent to 3 months of ordinary wages, maybe more. This higher price reflects multiple factors. The material itself is expensive. The working time is longer, perhaps 2 weeks of careful carving. The risk is higher. One mistake ruins valuable stone. And the status is greater. The client is paying partly for the stone's prestige. Wealthy clients do not flinch at these prices. They understand the value proposition. A seal they will use for years. A seal that represents their identity. A seal that must withstand scrutiny and impress observers. The price is small compared to the consequences of poor quality. You occasionally receive commission seals where the client provides their own stone, perhaps inherited, perhaps acquired specially, perhaps with sentimental significance. These commissions are delicate. The client's expectations are higher. The pressure to avoid mistakes is greater. You charge slightly more for client-provided materials, not to exploit their attachment, but to reflect the additional stress, the reality that you cannot control material quality, cannot return to the dealer if the stone proves defective, must succeed regardless of material challenges. Most clients accept this pricing logic. Those who complain usually have unrealistic expectations, who think engraving is simple, who do not understand the skill required, who want precious stone results at soft stone prices. You learned early to decline unrealistic commissions. Better to lose a difficult client than to accept inadequate payment and produce resentful work. Better to maintain standards than to compromise for marginal income. Your master taught this principle. A cheap seal creates expensive problems. Meaning, if you cut corners on quality to reduce price, the seal fails. The failure damages your reputation. The damaged reputation costs future commissions. The lost future commissions cost far more than the original underpayment. So you price fairly but firmly. You explain costs when clients question. You demonstrate quality when clients doubt. and you walk away when clients remain unreasonable. This approach means occasional lost commissions, but it also means sustained reputation. Clients who trust your work, clients who return for additional seals, clients who refer friends and associates. Long-term relationships that provide steady income. The economics of your workshop are straightforward but require management. Income arrives irregularly. Commissions cluster sometimes. Then gaps appear. But expenses continue steadily. Materials must be purchased. Tools must be maintained. Household must be fed. So you maintain reserves. Money set aside for lean periods. Enough to survive perhaps 2 or 3 months without commissions. This buffer provides security, prevents desperation that leads to bad decisions, allows you to decline inadequate offers. Building reserves required discipline early in your career. The temptation to spend all income immediately was strong. New tools, better materials, small luxuries, but you resisted, saved consistently, built the buffer that now provides stability. You also manage material inventory carefully. Stone blanks represent stored value. Too much inventory ties up money that could be used elsewhere. Too little inventory means declining commissions because materials are unavailable. You aim for perhaps 5 to 10 quality blanks in various stones. Enough variety to serve most clients immediately. Not so much that money sits idle for months. The balance requires judgment, experience, attention to seasonal patterns and demand. Certain times of year bring more commissions. After harvest, when farmers have sold grain and have money. Before major festivals, when people want new seals for ceremonial use. During commercial busy seasons, when merchants expand operations. You track these patterns informally. Not with written records, you are not fully literate. But through experience, through memory, through understanding your city's rhythms. You also face expenses beyond materials. Tool replacement. Your copper chisels wear down gradually. Your gravers break occasionally. Your borers dull. Your whetstone erodes. Each tool has a lifespan. Each must be replaced periodically. Tool costs are modest but cumulative, perhaps equivalent to 1 seal commission per year, spread across many months, but real nevertheless. Workshop space costs something. You do not own your workshop space. You occupy it through arrangement with the property owner. The payment is not large, but it is consistent. Must be made regardless of income variation. Your household expenses are typical for skilled craftspeople. Food, clothing, shelter, small repairs, occasional tools or furnishings, perhaps some saved for future needs. Not lavish, not struggling, comfortable. Your wife manages most household economy. She knows food prices, knows which vendors offer quality, knows when to buy in quantity versus small amounts. Her judgment matters as much as yours in different domain. You give her money from each commission payment. Not everything, but a portion. She decides how to allocate it. Grain, occasional meat, cloth when needed, small items that make daily life function. She does not interfere with your workshop expenses. You do not interfere with her household management. This division works, reduces friction, allows each person to exercise judgment in their area of expertise. You have 1 child currently, a young daughter. Children create expenses, food, clothing as they grow. Eventually perhaps training or apprenticeship costs. But children also provide future security, potential support in old age, continuation of household. Whether your daughter will enter a craft is unclear. Few women are seal engravers, though some women own seals, though some women manage businesses. The career paths for girls are different than for boys, but some paths exist. Your daughter will not be confined to purely domestic life if she shows other aptitudes. For now, she is young. Expenses are modest. Food and basic clothing. As she ages, expenses will increase. You prepare for this through continued saving, through building reputation that generates steady income, through managing your career to maximize earnings during your prime working years. A seal engraver's prime years are roughly 25 to 50. Before 25, still establishing reputation. After 50, eyesight declines. Hand steadiness decreases. The fine detail work becomes more difficult. Not impossible, but harder. You plan accordingly. Work hard during prime years. Build client relationships. Train apprentices who might eventually support you if your own work becomes impossible. Maintain reserves that can sustain you if commissions decline. This planning is not pessimistic. It is realistic. Every craftsperson faces physical decline eventually. Every profession, depending on fine motor control and sharp vision, has limited career span. You know this. Accept it. Prepare for it. Some older engravers transition to teaching, supervising apprentices, advising on designs, handling client relationships, while younger hands do actual carving. This extends career, maintains income, allows gradual rather than sudden retirement. You hope for this trajectory, but you do not assume it. You plan as if you must rely on yourself alone. Then anything better becomes bonus rather than necessary. The overall economic position of seal engravers is secure but not immune to disruption. If seal demand declined dramatically, income would suffer. If too many engravers entered the profession, competition would drive prices down. If imported stone became unavailable, work would become difficult or impossible. But these scenarios seem unlikely currently. The city grows. Administration expands. Trade increases. All trends suggest continued or increasing seal demand. The craft seems secure for your working lifetime. What happens beyond that is unknowable, but currently reasonable. You remember a conversation with your master during your final apprenticeship year. You asked about career prospects, about income potential, about security. He answered honestly, "A good burgul never becomes wealthy, but a good burgul never goes hungry. You will work steadily. You will eat adequately. You will have some comfort, not luxury, not hardship, the solid middle." This prediction has proven accurate. You have the solid middle, steady work, adequate food, some comfort, modest reserves, reasonable security, the life of a skilled craftsperson, not spectacular, but sustainable, respectable, sufficient. And in a city where most people labor more physically for less return, where uncertainty is common, where hardship visits regularly, the solid middle feels like success, feels like achievement, feels like the reward for years of patient training and disciplined practice. You do not envy the wealthy. Their complications seem burdensome. Their politics seem dangerous. Their obligations seem constraining. You have enough. Enough is enough. This contentment is its own form of wealth. The evening meal tonight is simple. Barley, lentils, a little oil, bread. Not feast, but nourishing. Your daughter eats eagerly. Your wife is satisfied with the quantity. You are full. After eating, you check your stone inventory. 3 lapis blanks, 4 carnelian, 2 diorite, several steatite, adequate variety, sufficient quantity, no urgent need to purchase. You check your tool basket. All tools present, all reasonably sharp. 1 graver tip slightly worn but still functional. Will need replacement soon but not immediately. You check your abrasive supply. Running low on finest grit. Will need to acquire more before next commission. The coarser grits are adequate. These checks are routine, brief, but important. They prevent surprises, prevent discovering mid-commission that you lack essential materials, prevent delays that frustrate clients. This attention to operational details is part of professional competence. The carving skill matters, but so does the boring administrative work, the inventory tracking, the tool maintenance, the client communication, the pricing judgment. All of it together creates sustainable practice, creates the comfortable middle, creates the life of a functioning craftsperson in the world's first true city. The lamp stays lit while you make a few notes, not written notes, mental notes, reminders to yourself, things to do tomorrow, materials to acquire, client to visit, small tasks that maintain momentum. Then the lamp is extinguished, the workshop darkens, the day ends, and you rest, knowing tomorrow will bring more of the same, more carving, more patient work, more steady income, more sustainable craft, the solid middle, where most good work happens, where most good lives are lived, where most civilization is actually built, not by the spectacular few at the top, by the competent many in the middle, including seal engravers, including you. Roll, lift, the impression appears. Roll, lift, the payment arrives. Roll, lift, The household is sustained. Roll, lift, the craft continues. One day at a time. One seal at a time. One comfortable life at a time. If there are children, they are not silent, but they are quieter at night. They come close. They ask for small things. They fall asleep in stages. You do not use your seal at home. You do not roll identity into clay at the dinner mat. But you feel the link softly. If the storerooms remain calm, households remain calm. If the system remains predictable, life feels survivable. So your job, though small, reaches into the shape of the evening. Not dramatically, quietly. As the house settles, the mind does what minds do. It reviews risks, not in a panic, in a low, practical loop. You think, what if a seal is stolen? What if someone uses it once in the wrong place and closes a jar that should have remained open? What if a ceiling is broken and blame travels backward through the system like smoke? You do not need to imagine villains. You only need to imagine hunger, greed, impatience. Those are enough. So you make a private discipline. When the institution seal is in your workshop, you keep it covered. You keep it close. You do not let it roll for fun. You do not let children touch it. Because you understand the paradox. The seal exists to control access. Therefore, the seal itself must be controlled. And then, because you are tired, you let the loop end. You have done what you can. You carved carefully. You tested honestly. You delivered a tool that reads clearly. Now the night can do what nights do. It can soften. It can quiet. It can let the world go slightly out of focus. The next morning, the seal is already working. Not in your hands. In the hands of the institution. This is the moment where your craft becomes invisible, the way the best tools become invisible. A storeroom worker ties cord around a jar. A clerk checks a list. A steward watches a basket count. Then clay is pressed over the knot. The seal rolls. A band of identity appears. Set aside. Next jar. Next basket. Next door. Cylinder seals exist for this. Repeatable impressions that identify authority and secure goods against unauthorized opening. And because the seal's impression is consistent, the work stays calm. Less arguing. Less guessing. Less, I swear I didn't open it. The clay says what happened. Or what did not happen. Later, someone checks the ceilings. Not with drama. With an eye that has seen many days. They look for breaks. For impressions that don't match. For clay that has been re-wet and smoothed. An attempt to hide a break. This is where the fear of counterfeiting becomes practical. Not theatrical. A seal impression is a standard. If the standard changes, it is visible. A wrong impression is like a wrong number in a ledger. It makes people stop moving. So the checker compares impressions the way a scribe compares totals. Quietly, patiently, with attention to small differences. They do not need a story. They need a match. And when they find a match, they move on. Because the goal is not to punish. The goal is to keep goods flowing without chaos. In the middle of the day, you see one of the older forms of record-keeping again. A bullae. A clay sphere that encloses tokens, counting objects that represent goods. The outer surface is sealed, often heavily, so that opening it becomes obvious. It sits in someone's hand like a small planet. Smooth, heavy, quiet. It is not meant to be pretty. It is meant to be closed. It is meant to travel safely. And it carries a simple promise. The count inside has not been altered. That is why the seal matters on a bullae. Not because seals are decorative. Because seals make tampering visible. You watch the surface of the bullae. The impression repeats. The same identity. The same authority. And you feel, calmly, how the system builds trust through layers. Tokens inside clay, ceilings outside, records nearby, and human eyes checking slowly. The clay sphere in the administrator's hand is not a simple object. It is a technology. An accounting technology. A trust technology. A predecessor to writing itself. You watch as the administrator prepares to seal it. This is why cylinder seals exist. This is the problem they were invented to solve. Before writing. Before tablets. Before any other recording system. Bullae. The bullae, the hollow clay ball, represents an elegant solution to an administrative problem. How to transport a count without writing. How to verify a quantity without opening the container. How to create tamper-evident evidence. Inside the bullae are tokens. Small clay objects. Each one represents something. A cone might represent a measure of grain. A sphere might represent a jar of oil. A cylinder might represent an animal. The specific meanings vary by context and time. But the principle is consistent. Tokens represent goods. The administrator making this bulla is recording a transaction. Perhaps a merchant is delivering 10 measures of grain to a temple storehouse. The merchant and the storehouse official agree on the amount, 10 measures. So 10 cone-shaped tokens are placed inside a clay ball. The ball is formed around them, while the clay is still soft, pinched closed, shaped into a sphere roughly the size of 2 fists, smooth on the outside, hollow inside, containing the count. Now comes the critical step, the sealing. The administrator takes their cylinder seal, the one you carved, the one that represents their authority, the one that identifies them specifically. They press the seal into the soft clay surface of the bulla. Then they roll, slowly, carefully, creating a continuous band of impressions around the sphere. Not just one impression, multiple impressions, covering much of the surface, making it impossible to open the bulla and reseal it without the tampering being obvious. You have sealed many bullae yourself. The technique is slightly different from sealing flat surfaces. The curvature requires adjusting pressure constantly, rolling at an angle, overlapping impressions slightly to ensure complete coverage. A well-sealed bulla shows clear, repeated impressions, the same identity mark appearing multiple times, creating a pattern that is difficult to replicate. A visual verification that this specific seal was used, that this specific person authorized this specific transaction. Now the bulla can travel, from merchant to storehouse, or from one storehouse to another, or from producer to distributor, whatever the transaction requires. The tokens inside represent the count. The seal impressions outside represent the authority. When the bulla reaches its destination, the recipient examines the seals. Do they match the expected seal? If trust is maintained. If no, questions arise. Who sealed this? Why is the seal different? Was there substitution? Was there deception? If the seals match, the recipient can break open the bulla, crack the clay, extract the tokens, count them, verify the count matches what was expected. The transaction is confirmed, or discrepancy is revealed. Once broken, the bulla cannot be resealed convincingly. The clay fragments cannot be reassembled invisibly. The seal impressions cannot be recreated perfectly. The tampering becomes obvious. This is the security feature. This is why the system works. But sometimes bullae must travel farther, through multiple handlers. In these cases, breaking the bulla at the first stop reveals the count but eliminates the security for subsequent stops. The solution is ingenious. Mark the bulla's surface with the same information that is inside. Before sealing, while the clay is still soft, press tokens into the surface. Create impressions showing what is inside. Then seal over these impressions. Now anyone along the journey can see the count without breaking the bulla. The token impressions on the surface reveal the contents. The seal impressions verify no one has tampered with those contents. The actual tokens inside provide final verification when the bulla reaches its ultimate destination. This marked surface bulla is a precursor to writing. It is external representation of internal information. It is symbolic communication that does not require spoken language. It is one step away from full writing systems. Some scholars centuries from now will argue that cylinder seals and bullae were essential catalysts for writing's development. That the practice of impressing symbols into clay, first tokens, then seals, led eventually to impressing more abstract symbols, to cuneiform, to full literacy. You do not think about this historical significance. You simply seal bullae when requested. Make the impressions clear. Ensure the coverage is complete. Do the technical work required. But you are participating in something profound. In the invention of external memory, of verification systems that transcend personal presence, of administrative technologies that enable cities to function. The token system itself is older than cylinder seals. Tokens existed for thousands of years in simpler forms. But the combination of tokens inside clay containers, sealed with distinctive marks, represents an evolutionary leap, a new level of sophistication, a new capability for managing complex transactions. Different institutions use different token systems. Temple households might use one set of token shapes and meanings. Merchant groups might use different ones. There is no universal standardization yet. But within each system, the meanings are consistent enough for participants to understand. You occasionally see tokens when bullae are broken open. Small clay objects, some carefully shaped, some roughly formed, some plain, some marked with incisions or impressions, each one representing a piece of information, a unit of value, a component of a count. The tokens themselves are mundane, easy to make, made in bulk, stored in quantities, But in aggregate, they create a sophisticated accounting system. They enable transactions involving hundreds or thousands of units. They make large-scale economic coordination possible. Without tokens and Bullae, such coordination would require memory alone, or verbal agreements without verification, or physical presence during every transfer. These alternatives do not scale. They fail when quantities become large, when distances become great, when trust becomes impersonal. So the token system scales, enables growth, supports the city's expansion, supports the administrative complexity required for 40,000 people to live together and not descend into chaos. Your role in this system is specific. Create seals that make the system work. Seals distinct enough to identify individuals. Seals clear enough to verify at a glance. Seals hard enough to resist counterfeiting. Seals that can be worn constantly so they are always available when needed. The entire system depends on seal quality. If seals were too similar, verification would fail. If impressions were too unclear, disputes would multiply. If materials were too soft, wear would destroy distinctiveness. If boring was too rough, seals would be inconvenient to carry and might be left behind when needed. So your craft, boring, technical, patient, is essential infrastructure. Not glamorous, not celebrated in songs or monuments, but necessary for daily functioning. For transactions happening without friction. For trust operating at scale. You remember sealing your first bulla. Your hands were nervous. The clay was soft, perhaps too soft. Your first roll created smeared impressions. Unclear. Unusable. Your master had you scrape off the clay. Rework the surface. Try again. This time with slightly firmer pressure. Slightly more careful alignment. The impressions improved. Still not perfect, but recognizable. Clear enough. He nodded. Acceptable. Not great, but usable. You will get better. And you did. Through practice. Through hundreds of sealings. Through developing muscle memory for the right pressure, the right angle, the right speed of rolling. Now you can seal a bulla quickly and cleanly. First attempt. No errors. No hesitation. The motion is automatic. The hand knows what to do. The eye knows what to look for. The mind is quiet during the process, letting trained instinct guide the work. This automaticity is professionalism. The boring competence that makes systems function. The unremarkable reliability that enables complex coordination. The quiet skill that goes unnoticed precisely because it works so well. Some Bullae are small, fist-sized, containing just a few tokens, recording minor transactions. These seal quickly. The surface area is limited. A few good impressions cover adequately. Other Bullae are large, 2 fists or more, containing dozens of tokens, recording major transactions. These require more time, more careful attention, more overlapping impressions to ensure complete coverage. But the process is the same, just more of it. You also seal tablet cases occasionally. A clay tablet is written and then enclosed in a clay envelope, a flat or slightly curved clay sheet wrapped around the tablet. The envelope is sealed. The seal impressions verify the envelope has not been opened. When disputes arise later, the envelope can be broken open. The original tablet inside provides evidence, proves what was written, resolves the dispute. Then a new envelope can be created if the tablet must continue traveling. This envelope system is newer than Bullae. It emerged as writing developed, as tablets became common, as the need for tamper-evident protection extended beyond token counts to actual written records. Your seals serve both systems. The older token Bullae system, the newer writing envelope system. Both require the same fundamental technology, distinctive, portable, verifiable identity marks. Both depend on your craft to function properly. The administrator finishes sealing the Bullae, examines the impressions, nods satisfaction, sets the Bullae aside to dry. In a day or two, the clay will harden. The Bullae will become durable, ready to travel, ready to serve its purpose. You watch without interfering. Your work is already done. The seal you carved months ago, the seal that now impresses this Bullae, the seal that will create many more impressions over its lifetime. On Bullae, on tablets, on door ceilings, on jar ceilings, on anything requiring verification. This multiplication of effect is satisfying. You carve one seal. That seal creates thousands of impressions. Those impressions enable thousands of transactions. Those transactions support the city's functioning. The effort to impact ratio is substantial. Not that you calculate it consciously. Not that you spend time estimating how many impressions your seals will make. But you feel it. The sense that your work ripples outward. That small causes create large effects. That patient craft supports vast systems. The token Bullae technology is not perfect. Weaknesses exist. If someone is determined enough, they could attempt to create a duplicate Bullae. Match the tokens inside. Forge the seal impressions. Hope no one notices discrepancies. This is why seal distinctiveness matters so much. Why you work to create unique designs. Why you add small tells that are difficult to replicate. Why you use depth variations that casual copying will miss. All these details make forgery harder. Not impossible, but harder. Harder enough that most potential cheaters will not attempt it. And for those who do attempt it, the differences usually become visible under examination. An administrator who knows their own seal intimately, who has seen it impressed thousands of times, will often notice even subtle forgeries. The eye trained to see detail catches discrepancies others might miss. You have been asked twice to examine bullies suspected of forgery, to compare their impressions to impressions you know are genuine, to identify differences. Both times you found discrepancies, small ones, a line slightly wrong, a spacing slightly off, a depth variation absent. Differences that prove the Bullae was not sealed with the legitimate seal. What happened to the forgers you do not know. Not your concern. Your job was technical assessment, identifying the forgery. After that, others handle consequences. But knowing your seals help catch fraud creates quiet satisfaction. Your work is not just enabling transactions. It is preventing deception, maintaining system integrity, protecting trust. And trust, ultimately, is what makes cities possible. What allows strangers to cooperate. What enables trade to function. What keeps chaos at bay. Your seals contribute to trust. Therefore, your seals contribute to civilization itself. The Bullae sits drying, smooth sphere, marked with repeated impressions, containing its hidden count, waiting to travel, waiting to serve, waiting to be broken open eventually and reveal its secrets. But until that moment, secure, verified, trusted, because someone, you, carved a seal well enough to make this security possible. Patient work, boring work, essential work. Roll, lift, the impression appears. Roll, lift, trust is established. Roll, lift, civilization functions. One sealed Bullae at a time.
If someone asked you what you do, you would not say, "I am an artist." You would say something plainer. You make the mark that proves permission. You make the tool that closes doors honestly. You make the identity that travels with goods. In the Uruk world where administrative systems grow alongside early writing, cylinder seals are often described as vital to accounting and institutional control, used on sealings and documents. So your job is designing distinct identity, engraving a repeatable mark, supporting security through tamper evidence, serving institutions that must distribute goods at scale. That is why the craft is strict. That is why the bore must be true. That is why you test, roll and correct until the impression reads clearly. Because a seal is not a private object. It is a public function. And public functions must not wobble. Now let the story loosen. Return to the workshop. The lamp is steady again. One flame. Deep shadows. Stone dust resting where it fell. You hold a blank cylinder in your palm. Cool. Smooth. You prepare a tiny patch of damp clay. Not a jar. Not a door. Just clay for practice. You set the seal down. You roll. Slowly. A band appears. Roll, lift. Roll, lift. The motion is simple enough that the mind can stop trying to follow the plot. There is no plot to solve. Only work to repeat. A small security made by hand. A small identity rolled into clay. Roll, lift. The lamp flickers once. Then steadies. And your breath matches the slow turning. In, and out. Roll, lift. In, and out. Roll, lift. Your hands become heavier. Your thoughts become lighter. The seal rests on the work surface. The clay rests. The room rests. In the end, the most peaceful part of your profession is this. The mark remains when you stop. The clay holds what the hands did. The day does not need you anymore. It has been recorded. It has been secured. It has been closed. So you can let your eyes close too. You can let the last sound be the softest one. A faint scrape of stone, a quiet roll on clay, and then nothing at all. Not every seal is made for one person's neck cord. Some are made for a place. A storeroom office. A temple household. A workshop that issues goods. The second commission arrives without display. A runner brings a small clay tag, still damp, pressed with an old impression faded and imperfect. The message is simple. We need a replacement. No speech about why. But the reason lives in the object. The old seal is worn. Edges are softened. Lines that once read clearly now blur. And in a world that depends on legible marks, blur is a quiet emergency. Because blur creates opportunity. Opportunity invites misuse. So you accept the commission the way you accept any serious work. By becoming slower. You study the old impression under lamplight. You do not guess meanings. You read shapes. You look for what must remain constant. The spacing rhythm. The repeat point where the band meets itself. The tells that distinguish the seal from any other. A worn impression is like a voice heard through a wall. You can still recognize it, but you must concentrate. You smooth a new patch of clay. You press the old seal's impression, or the remaining reference, beside it. You compare the two surfaces. You decide what should be preserved. And you decide what can be improved without breaking continuity. This is the practical tension of institutional life. They want a replacement that behaves like the original, but they also want a replacement that restores sharpness. So you aim for faithful clarity. Not novelty. For a personal seal, a client may choose beauty. For an institutional seal, the choice often leans toward durability and consistent carving response. You lay out blanks. You let your finger pads read the stone's grain. A stone with too coarse a grain fights fine lines. A stone too brittle chips on sharp corners. You choose what holds detail, what rolls smoothly, what tolerates daily handling. Then you begin the shaping. Coarser abrasive first, then finer, then a final smoothing that prepares the surface for cuts. The workshop's sound becomes steady again. SHH, SHH, stone against stone, grit doing the work, hands guiding it. The bore is not glamorous. But it is essential. A bore that wanders makes a seal feel unbalanced. An unbalanced seal rolls unevenly. Uneven rolling makes uneven impressions. Uneven impressions make arguments. So you drill as if you are drilling trust itself. You align the blank carefully. You drill in a controlled rhythm. You stop to wet the abrasive. You clear slurry. You check the bore mouth. You turn the seal and drill from the other side. Two approaches that meet near the center because meeting cleanly matters. And when the two drill paths do not join perfectly, you do what engravers do. You correct with patient interior smoothing, filing or abrasive reaming until the bore becomes one continuous channel. This is slow work. It is also the kind of work that separates a casual craftsperson from a professional. A professional makes the unseen parts correct. Now comes the moment that always feels slightly strange, even after years. You carve what you do not intend to look at. Because the world will look at the impression, not the seal. So you sketch the design lightly, if sketch is even the right word. You set shallow guide cuts. You imagine the rolled clay as a small scroll of evidence. You imagine someone checking it quickly in low light. Does this match? That is your audience. Not art collectors. Not a poet. A checker. A steward. A tired worker who does not want trouble. So you carve for recognition. You carve for speed of reading. You avoid overly complex scenes. You avoid delicate details that fill with clay. You aim for motifs that hold up under repetition. Bold outlines, distinctive negative spaces, a rhythm of lines that cannot be mistaken. Your work here is less storytelling and more engineering. The seal must survive dust, sweat, handling, wet clay, dry clay, heat, and hurried use. This is the part where you can almost hear your own rule. Make it legible when used badly. Because you know it will be used badly sometimes. That is not disrespect. That is life. You prepare a clay pad. Not too wet. Not too dry. You set the cylinder down. You roll. Slow. Even. The impression appears. And immediately you see the truth. Where the band is strong, it reads. Where a line is too shallow, it fades. Where a groove is too fine, it fills. So you do not praise. You adjust. A little deeper here. A little wider there. A simplification that makes the impression clearer. Then you roll again. This is the engraver's discipline. Test adjust until the mark becomes reliable. The institution sends word later that week. Not a panic. A concern. A jar arrived with an impression that almost matches. Almost is the dangerous word. Almost means someone is trying. Someone used a worn seal when the sharp one was expected. Or someone has begun carving an imitation. Or someone pressed a different seal and hoped no one would notice. You do not accuse. You listen. You ask to see the clay. They bring the sealing. You hold it under the lamp. You compare it to your test roll. You find the difference. Not big. Small. A curve that breaks the rhythm. A gap that shouldn't exist. A tell that only a careful eye would catch. And you understand the role you play. You are not law. You are not force. You are clarity. You explain what the clay shows. This is not the same seal. That sentence is enough to make the institution tighten control. Enough to make them check other jars. Enough to make someone somewhere sweat quietly. And then, because this is a sleep story, you do not chase the thief through alleyways. You return to your bench. You do what you can do. You make the mark harder to imitate. You add complexity where it helps. Not everywhere. You build tells that survive rolling. A micro notch at a repeat point. A pair of lines that cross in a way hard to copy. A distinctive negative space that should remain open in clay. You deepen the right grooves. You keep the surface polished so it rolls cleanly. You do not turn the seal into a maze. You turn it into a standard. A standard with a signature you can recognize in one glance. This is the ancient version of a security feature. Quiet, physical, and practical. The old seal does not disappear. It must be controlled. Sometimes it is stored. Sometimes it is retired under watch. Sometimes it is broken so it cannot be used again. This is not drama. This is policy. Because an old seal in the wrong hand is still power. So the institution decides. The old seal will be kept out of circulation. The new seal will take its place. You are not present for every decision. But you understand the logic. A system that depends on marks must control the marks. Back in your own space, the day returns to texture. Lamp heat. Stone dust. The slightly oily smell of flame. A bowl of abrasive paste. A cloth for wiping. A reed basket for tools. You sit where the light falls correctly. You turn the cylinder in your fingers. You continue carving. You do not hurry to finish. Because finishing fast is how mistakes become permanent. Your pace is steady enough that the work becomes a kind of quiet metronome. Scratch, pause, wipe, scratch. A younger hand watches you. Not close enough to bump you. Close enough to see. You do not begin with theory. You begin with pressure. You show the apprentice how a light cut feels. How a heavy cut feels. How stone talks through resistance. You give them a scrap piece. You let them practice shallow lines. You let them ruin it safely. Then you show them a test roll. They see their lines turn to blur in clay. They see why engraving is not drawing. They see why legibility matters more than pretty detail. You teach them the rule that keeps a seal from failing in the field. Carve for the clay. Not for your pride. You were not born knowing how to carve seals. No one is. The skill requires years of training. Years of failure. Years of watching. Years of patient repetition until the hand learns what the mind cannot fully explain. The term for your profession in Sumerian is burgul. In later Akkadian, it will be purkullu. Both words carry weight. Respect. The recognition that seal cutting is not casual labor. It is specialized knowledge acquired through formal apprenticeship. The standard apprenticeship lasts 4 years minimum. Sometimes longer if the apprentice is slow. Sometimes slightly shorter if they are exceptionally gifted. But 4 years is the baseline. The accepted duration. The time required to transform an interested young person into a competent professional. You began your apprenticeship at perhaps 13 or 14 years old. Old enough to have patience. Young enough that hands were still forming habits. Eyes were still sharpening. Mind was still flexible enough to learn reverse thinking, the strange mental skill required for intaglio carving. Your master was not a relative. Seal cutting is not usually hereditary. Too specialized. Too dependent on particular aptitudes. So apprentices are selected from young people who show promise, who demonstrate steady hands, good vision, ability to focus for long periods, tolerance for tedious repetition. Your father knew your hands were good. You had helped with stone work since childhood. You could feel when a cut was true, when a surface was smooth, when a tool needed adjustment. These basic sensitivities suggested you might succeed at finer work. So your father approached a master engraver, negotiated terms, agreed to payment. Not a large amount, but enough to compensate the master for time spent teaching rather than working, for materials wasted during learning, for patience required when teaching fails and must begin again. The first year was not carving. It was preparation work. Endless preparation work. You learned to mix abrasive pastes, getting the consistency right. Too thin and the grit slides away. Too thick and it cakes and stops cutting. The right consistency feels slightly gritty but flows smoothly. You learn to prepare work surfaces, keeping them clean, removing debris that might scratch stone, maintaining the slight texture that helps stone grip during polishing but does not damage the surface. You learn to sharpen tools. This is not simple. Each tool type requires specific technique. The copper chisel needs one angle. The pointed gravers need another. The borer needs yet another. And each material being carved hard stone versus soft stone requires adjustments. Your hands developed calluses in specific places. The spots where tools pressed, where stone edges rested, where cord rubbed during drilling. These calluses are professional markers. An experienced engraver can see another engraver's hands and know immediately, here is someone who works stone. You learn to see detail, to notice tiny variations. Your master would hold up two cylinder blanks that looked identical. What is different? He would ask. At first, you saw nothing. They were the same. But he would point out minute variations. A slight taper in one. A barely visible crack in another. A difference in how light reflected. Over months, your eyes trained. You began seeing what you had been blind to. The subtle differences became obvious. The obvious differences became loud. Eventually, you could assess blanks as quickly as your master. Sometimes faster. You learned materials through handling. Not through lecture. Through experience. Your master would give you stones. Drill this. You would drill. Sometimes the stone would behave. Sometimes it would crack. Sometimes the drill would skip. Sometimes the abrasive would cake. Each failure was a lesson. Not punished. Just observed. Discussed. Tried again. Gradually, you learned which stones accepted which techniques. Which materials required more patience. Which required more force. Which required different abrasives. The second year introduced actual carving. But not seals. Practice pieces. Broken cylinders. Cheap steatite. Materials where failure cost little. Your master would draw a simple design. Carve this. You would try. The result would be terrible. uneven depths, wobbling lines, lost details where the tool slipped. He would examine your work without criticism, without praise, just observation. Here you pressed too hard. Here not enough. Here the tool angle was wrong. Try again. Try again. Try again. Try again. Hundreds of practice pieces. Thousands of lines. Tens of thousands of tool strokes. Until the hand began learning. Until the tool began feeling like extension of intention rather than foreign object. The hardest skill, the one that took longest to develop, was reverse thinking. Carving in intaglio means carving what will become the negative space. What is cut away becomes the raised image when impressed in clay. Your brain fights this constantly. It wants to carve the image directly. To make the raised parts by leaving them raised. To make the low parts by cutting them low. But intaglio requires the opposite. What you want raised must be cut away. What you want to recede must be left as stone. It is cognitively backwards. Mentally exhausting. Like trying to write with your non-dominant hand while looking in a mirror. Your master had a teaching method for this. He would have you draw a simple design on flat clay. Then have you try to carve that same design on a cylinder. Then roll the cylinder and see the impression. The impression would be wrong. Backwards. Confused. But wrong in instructive ways. You would see where your brain had reversed incorrectly. Where you had carved positive when you should have carved negative. Repeat. 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 Draw. Carve. Roll. See error. Understand error. Try again. After perhaps 6 months of this, something clicked. Your brain began automatically translating. Began seeing the carved surface and simultaneously seeing the future impression. The reversal became intuitive rather than calculated. But even after it became intuitive, it required concentration. Let your mind wander and the carving became muddled. Lost the reversal. Created impressions that made no sense. So you learned concentration. Extended focus. The ability to maintain mental sharpness for hours while performing repetitive physical actions. This combination, physical steadiness and mental clarity, is the engraver's core skill. The third year was refinement. Carving actual practice seals. Designs that could almost be used. Not quite good enough for paying clients. But close. Your master would commission you. A merchant needs a seal showing a boat and containers. Design it. Carve it. Show me the result. You would design. Often badly. Too complex. Or too simple. Or compositionally unbalanced. Or failing to consider how the design wraps around a cylinder. Your master would critique the design before allowing you to carve. This boat will not read clearly. The lines are too close. They will fill with clay. Separate them. You would adjust. Redesign. Sometimes multiple iterations before approval to begin carving. Then the carving itself would reveal new problems. A design that looked good on paper might not translate to stone. Might require tool angles that were impractical. Might create weak spots where stone could chip. More adjustments. More learning. More failed practice pieces. But gradually, very gradually, the practice seals improved. Became genuinely usable. Your master would occasionally give your practice seals to clients who needed cheap, quick work. Who could not afford his personal attention but needed something functional. These were your first real commissions. Not under your name. Under your master's name. But your work nevertheless. Creating actual tools that actual people would use for actual purposes. The pride was substantial. Not expressed outwardly. But felt deeply. You had made something useful. Something that would leave marks in clay. Marks that might last for years. Marks that would verify transactions. Secure goods. Enable trust. The fourth year was semi-independence. You still worked in your master's workshop. Still under his oversight. But increasingly handling commissions yourself. Meeting clients yourself. Making design decisions yourself. Your master would review each finished seal. Would sometimes require changes. Would sometimes approve immediately. Gradually, approvals became more frequent. Corrections less frequent. Near the end of the fourth year, your master arranged a test. Not formal. Not ceremonial. Just practical. A real commission from a real client who did not know you were an apprentice. The client was a minor temple official. The commission was standard. Nothing unusual. But executed entirely by you without supervision. You carved it. Tested it. Delivered it. The official accepted it. Paid for it. Used it. Your master took you aside afterward. You are a burgul now. Not an apprentice. A seal cutter. You can establish your own workshop. Take your own commissions. Train your own apprentices someday. No ceremony. No celebration. Just recognition. Simple and direct. The way craftspeople mark transitions. You worked another several months in your master's workshop. Saving money. Building client relationships. Acquiring tools. Then you found your own space. Small. Basic. But yours. You remember your first independent commission. Your first client who came to you, not to your master because they had heard your name. Your name. Not as an apprentice. As a professional. The seal you carved for that first independent client was not extraordinary. Not your finest work. But competent. Reliable. Functional. And that was enough. That was what mattered. The client paid you. You bought materials with your own earnings. You began building your own reputation. Separate from your master's reputation, though still connected to it. You were part of a lineage. A tradition. But also an individual practitioner with your own style developing. You maintain contact with your master. Visit occasionally. Ask advice on difficult commissions. Share news about clients. The relationship transforms from master-apprentice to colleague-colleague. But respect remains. Always. You also maintain contact with other former apprentices of your master. A small network. When one of you receives a commission beyond your capacity, you refer it to another. When someone needs specialized materials, you share sources. When someone encounters a new technical problem, you discuss solutions. This informal network functions like a guild, though no formal guild structure exists yet. Just mutual support among people who share knowledge, who trust each other because they learned from the same master, who share certain standards because they were trained to the same expectations. Now you have your own apprentice. A young person showing promise. Eager. Nervous. Clumsy at first but improving. You teach as you were taught. Patient repetition. Allowing failure. Explaining quietly. Demonstrating technique. Letting the apprentice's hands learn through practice rather than through explanation alone. Watching your apprentice struggle with reverse thinking, you remember your own struggles. How impossible it seemed initially. How slowly it developed. How suddenly it clicked. You do not rush your apprentice. You allow the normal learning pace. 4 years. Maybe longer if needed. The skill cannot be forced faster. It develops according to its own timeline. According to the apprentice's readiness. According to the accumulated practice required for hand and eye and mind to integrate. When your apprentice completes a practice piece that is genuinely good, truly usable, you feel something your master must have felt watching you. Satisfaction. Not because you created the work. Because you enabled someone else to create it. Past knowledge forward. Maintain the tradition. Ensured that seal cutting will continue when your hands can no longer hold tools steady. This is the real apprenticeship cycle. Not just learning. Teaching. Not just receiving. Transmitting. Not just being trained. Training others. And through this cycle, the craft persists. Generation after generation. Each burgul teaching the next. Each purkullu passing along techniques. The skill surviving because it is valuable. Because cities need it. Because seals enable the trust that makes urban life function. You are one link in this chain. Not the first. Not the last. Just one necessary link. Holding technique. Teaching technique. Ensuring continuity. The apprentice polishes a practice blank. The motion is still awkward. Still uncertain. But improving. Each day, slightly better. Each week, slightly closer to competence. You watch without interfering. Letting the learning happen. Letting the hand discover its own path to steadiness. Letting the eye train itself to see detail. Letting the mind slowly develop reverse awareness. This is how burguls are made. Not through inspiration. Through perspiration. Through years of patient repetition. Through failures transformed into lessons. Through practice accumulated until it becomes skill. Through skill refined until it becomes art. Through art shared until it becomes tradition. And the tradition continues. Roll, lift, the impression appears. And knowledge passes forward. One apprentice at a time. One generation at a time. One patient year at a time. When the seal is complete, the client threads it. A cord through the bore. The seal hangs near the chest, under cloth, or above it depending on the person's role. This is not jewelry. It is access. It is permission. It is the ability to close and mark. It is also risk. If the seal is lost, someone else can wear authority. So people touch it often, almost unconsciously, like checking for a key. Evening brings its own kind of order. Doors are secured. Storerooms are closed. Baskets are covered. Jars are sealed. A worker presses clay over a knot. The seal rolls across it. The impression darkens as the clay dries. And the door becomes honest again. This is one of the most calming visuals in the entire ancient world aesthetic. Security created by a single, steady motion. Roll, lift. No shouting. No metal locks. Just clay and identity. A seal matters because people care about what it protects. Grain feeds children. Oil lights lamps. Beer is rations and routine. Textiles keep bodies covered. A single missing jar is not abstract. It is a missing evening. A missing meal. A household argument. So when a seal is rolled, it is not a cold bureaucratic act. It is a quiet protection of ordinary life. That is the deeper emotional truth, delivered softly. Administration feels boring until it fails. Then it becomes the center of everyone's attention. Your craft exists to prevent that moment. You do not need named wars to feel strain. Heat dries clay too fast. Dust settles into grooves and makes impressions muddy. A shipment arrives late. A storeroom count feels tight. People become watchful. Voices sharpen. The institution does not announce crisis. It simply tightens. More checks. More sealings. More careful comparison. And in that tightening, your seal becomes even more important. Not because it solves shortages, but because it prevents scarcity from becoming theft disguised as normal operations. Some evenings you continue work after the household sleeps. Not because you are driven by ambition. Because lamplight is good for seeing shallow cuts. The shadows reveal texture. You polish a seal's surface so it rolls smoothly. You shape a new blank for tomorrow. You prepare abrasive paste and cover it so it won't dry into useless crust. You lay out tools where your hand will find them. This is the craftsman's version of peace. Tomorrow made easier by a small effort tonight. Even if the stone seal disappears one day, lost, broken, buried, the impressions remain in clay. A sealing kept with a jar. A sealing pressed onto a bullae. A sealing attached to a transaction. Over time, they stack like quiet memories of authority. This was closed by someone. This was checked. This was accepted. The seal is a person's identity made repeatable. A mark that outlives the hand that rolled it. Another suspicious sealing appears. This time the imitation is cruder. It tries to match the large shapes but fails at the microtells. The checker sees it quickly. That is what you wanted. Not perfection. Detection. A defense that works even when people are tired. The institution responds calmly. They recheck the storeroom, they review who had access, they tighten procedures. No cinematic punishment. Just system behavior. Because systems survive by adapting. No one stands in the street praising seal engravers. But they respect you in a particular way. They speak your name softly when they need something done correctly. They worry about your work when they suspect wrongdoing. They understand that your craft is close to power. And anything close to power carries a shadow. So you keep your own life modest. You keep your tools clean. You keep your mouth closed around sensitive commissions. Not because you are secretive. Because discretion is part of the job. If this episode has one educational point, delivered without lecture, it is this. The cylinder seal is not art history trivia. It is early operational security. It is identity and access control made physical. It is an answer to the problem of scale. When a city becomes large, trust must become standardized. And standardization becomes a tool. Your tool. Stone carved into a mark that makes goods flow without chaos. Return to the workbench. The lamp flame is steady. You have a small clay pad. You hold the seal. You set it down. Roll. The impression appears. Lift. Roll. Lift. Roll. Lift. The rhythm is simple enough to become background. Your mind stops evaluating. Stops checking. Stops comparing. It begins to float. The clay holds the mark. The bench holds the tools. The room holds the shadows. And you do not need to hold anything. Roll, lift. In, and out. Roll, lift. The sound becomes softer in imagination until it becomes almost nothing at all. You can sleep now. Thanks for listening. Good night.